Welcome to the final session of the afternoon, and this is focused on updates from the international partners for the Cwetsch initiative for the Western Balkans and Ukraine. As we've said on a number of occasions, this is something of a milestone for the Cwetsch initiative as it has now been operational for 3 years. So what better time to actually reflect on the achievements of the initiative, also to reflect on what the challenges of the initiative have been, but also think on what have been key lessons, the key learning points that we can take forward into the future. So I'm delighted that on the stage we actually have all 7 partner organizations. That is a strength because it shows a true partnership. However, there is one drawback. It means we have less time for each contributor. So before we kick off, based on the first question, which is the panel's views on what have been the key achievements and the milestones from their organizational perspective, I would, of course, like to introduce the panel. As it is a splendid panel we have for you today. So first up, I'd like to introduce Véronique, who is on my immediate right, on your left. Véronique Marx is the team leader for Just Transition and Energy Poverty in the Directorate General for Energy of the Directorate General for Energy of the European Commission in Brussels. In her role, she coordinates a variety of programs on coal phase-out, regional exchanges between coal regions, as well as the Commission's response to prevailing energy poverty in the EU. Beside her is Pohl, Wolfhart Pohl, who currently holds the position as lead specialist for environment and geosciences in the World Bank. His current focus is on coal transition and decarbonisation, legacy pollution management, land remediation and repurposing in the context of former mining and industrial sites. His latest operational engagements are in the context of large-scale coal mine closure and transition programs, and I can honestly say it takes him to all the corners of the globe. I would also like to introduce Adam Cwetsch. However, Adam, you have met before. He spoke earlier, and he is at the end of the panel. Adam is the head of the European Green Deal Unit in the Energy Community Secretariat, where he leads the work related to the implementation of the Energy Community Decarbonisation Agenda. And as I said, Adam has already spoken today. I would also like to introduce Anna Vasylyeva. Anna is an energy transition specialist at the Climate Strategy and Delivery Department at the EBRD. In her role, she supports governments and clients in fostering energy transition through policy and investment support. Anna leads the EBRD's work on just transition and represents the bank at the Initiative for Coal Regions in Transition in the Western Balkans and the Ukraine. And so it is quite right that you are and appropriate that you're on the panel today. So welcome, Anna. To my immediate left and to your right, I'm delighted to introduce Matteo Rivellini. He is head of division for the Western Balkans and Turkey at the European Investment Bank. Matteo is an experienced manager of the European Investment Bank with a unique expertise in infrastructure, impact and development finance in Central Europe, Italy, Turkey and the Western Balkans. With his team of over 20 bankers, he finances €1.5 billion euros of investment every year, supporting sustainable investments in Turkey, the Western Balkans, in the sectors of green transition, digital transformation, transport connectivity, SMEs, and impact finance. Welcome, Matteo. And we have also Marek, who is to the right of the panel. And I'm delighted to welcome Marek. Marek is head of the Executive Education Office at the College of Europe in Natolin, which is close to Warsaw. In this capacity, he has worked with the World Bank on developing and deploying the Coal Regions in Transition Learning Academy, a facility I'm sure many of you are aware of and have probably used. As you know, it's a training program helping stakeholders in the design, coordination, and implementation of just coal transition programs in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. The final panelist, who is at the extreme left-hand side for you, is Marcin Jamiołkowski, and he is head of Financing Sources Coordination Team with the Polish National Fund for Environment Protection and Water Management. He joined the National Fund in 2005, and from the beginning of his work, he was involved in the implementation of projects financed by the EU. Marcin has been involved in the preparation of EU fund frameworks in a range of programs, and also is heavily involved in the current financial program 21 to 27. He is involved in the operationalization and launch of the Modernization Fund in Poland, and he is involved in the design of new financial instruments implemented by the National Fund, as well as conceptual and legislative work. So a very broad agenda you have, Marcin, so welcome to the panel. So, as I said, we are in quite a unique situation. We have reached the 3-year mark for the initiative, so this is a time for reflection, and I can't think of a better time, I can't think of a better group of people to be joined on the panel for this discussion. Please be rest assured we are going to leave time for questions from the floor, so the contributions from the panel will be quite short and to the point. So, turning to the first reflection, what have been the key achievements and milestones of the initiative? And first up, Véronique, your thoughts.
Hello? It works now? Yep. Thank you, Robert. Now, you said that you would have 2 minutes to answer, so I'm going to stick to 2 main points. So for us, the key achievements and the milestones are clearly the community building. We came from far 3 years ago, and really managed to build a certain community around the just transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. Just by looking at the people sitting around here on the stage, but also looking at the different colors of the badges, I think it's really true that we can say that we have brought people together and built a certain sense of belonging around the just transition. And then, of course, there's also the awareness raising on the topic, especially among local stakeholders and at local level. And this is really due to the Secretariat that was financed by the European Commission. They have done an incredible work to reach these achievements and done many activities over the past 3 years, and I will just take very briefly 30 seconds to kind of go through them, but we could speak about them for a long time. There was the Co-Regions Exchange Program, which led to 8 sets of exchanges, and totaling 11 visits representing stakeholders from more than 22 regions in the Western Balkans and Ukraine and in the EU. Throughout all these exchanges, around 220 participants were involved. Then the Secretariat also organized workshops on just transition, 6 workshops in each of the initiative's countries, on a very diversity of topics, the preparation of the NECPs, on roadmap, on the just transition, on strategy development, on stakeholder engagement, and so forth. So very much a large variety of topics that were discussed and that really brought to the awareness of stakeholders. And then the Secretariat also organized a webinar series. These webinars will still be online and can be consulted throughout the next years. 6 webinars were organized with an average of around 100 online participants per webinar. Also, again, looking at various topics touching on the cold phase and just transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine.
Thank you, Véronique. I think that amply demonstrates the progress that's been made, certainly in the last year. You know, new tangible services being provided to the community in this room, everything from, as you say, exchanges through to workshops and webinars. Wolf, I'd like to turn to you and get your perspective from the World Bank in regard to the achievements over the last 3 years.
Okay, I think if the Co-Region and Transitions platform was a plane, we would just be after takeoff, but we would still be far from cruising altitude. So for us, as the World Bank, it was really about creating entry points, about helping countries on a very hands-on technical assistance level to understand what just transition is and to see where there are ways of actually preparing, coordinating, organizing themselves, setting themselves up to tackle this problem. Just a couple of examples. I think one of the more valuable things that we developed actually in Poland, but then applied in countries like Bosnia, Kosovo, Northern Macedonia, is tools for diagnostics, for planning. One example is the labor diagnostics that we developed in Ruda Śląska in Poland. That is a very useful tool to understand how the labor force actually can be reskilled, repurposed, reassigned to different economic sectors. The land utilization repurposing assessment tool that we developed enables clients to understand large tracts of land in their development potential for something that is not coal. Besides that, we did a lot of capacity building. We participated in the Coal Academy that Marek will talk about later. We participated with hands-on technical support to study tours. And last not least, we created an instrument that we called the Coal Transition Roadmaps, first developed in Greece and Western Macedonia, and now applied in Bosnia. And in a similar, maybe not quite as complete form in Poland, which of course is not part of the Western Balkans or Ukraine, but that again informed work we're doing in Kosovo to help to repurpose the vast mining lands of Kek. I'll stop here, very technically oriented, but in the end we want to come to a point where we have large transformative projects that actually can be financed and implemented and make a difference on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolf. I loved your analogy of takeoff. We've achieved takeoff, but there's still some work to be done in regard to reaching cruising altitudes and cruising speed. But I think what has struck me is still there were clear things you referenced, real tangibles, such as diagnostic tools, roadmaps, and obviously the academy, which we'll be hearing more about. Adam, I was wondering if you'd like to just give your view from the energy community perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think I will start from where I ended a bit in the presentation at the beginning, which is we managed to maintain the direction that was set and the objectives of the initiatives that were set at the beginning. And I think all of us have slightly different portfolios to share, different capacity and knowledge. And I think one of the main values was, of course, to use this value of an exchange to the fullest extent. The reach out to the local partners, I think specifically to energy community, which usually works with central governments. That was something that, for example, using the example of workshops, was a very valuable issue for us, issue that we managed to build on, for example, in creating our thematic initiatives in energy community. One of that is the Clean Air Regions initiative, where we indeed try to focus on working with municipalities and assisting them with local quality air plans. There is a gender initiative that we are engaged in. There is an Energy Poverty Center, and we also regularly organize Just Transition Forum to bring the stakeholders together. In a nutshell, I think that would be my quick comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I do like this sort of notion of a journey. So we're approaching cruising speed, but at least we're going in the right direction. And it's a very valid point, because I was actually on the first call, the first annual meeting call, which was obviously online because of COVID. And we set a clear direction. And if you actually do think of where we are today, we have actually gone in that direction. So it is no small feat. Anna, please, over to you. Your thoughts from the perspective of the EBRD. I think it should be on.
Can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. For us, from the very start of the initiative, we saw our role across the two key dimensions, so across the policy support and across the investment support as our contribution to CRIT. So in 2020, we launched our Just Transition initiative at the EBRD, focusing across the three pillars: green economy transition, human capital development, and economic diversification. And we worked across those in the Western Balkans 6 countries, as well as in Ukraine. We started piloting our investment projects quite early on. So, for example, working on the repurposing of the coal mining lands to solar PV, including the associated reskilling initiatives for the workforce. But at the same time, we saw large policy gaps. So we have started supporting the governments in the region, so including the government of North Macedonia, together with the European Union delegation, but also the government of Serbia in the development of the Just Transition roadmaps. And of course, we kept on working working very closely with our partners here. From there on, we moved on to a little bit more of programmatic approach and trying to work on scaling up the financing. So I'm very happy to sit here in front of you today and say that we are doing quite a lot of work right now in North Macedonia for actually mobilization of the finance at scale together with a lot of partners, including all of the IFIs who are sitting here from this initiative, which we'll be announcing at COP28 very shortly. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for that intervention. Definitely clearly noting the geographic footprint of the initiative and that scaling up is beginning to occur in regard to financing, a much needed part of the agenda. So, Matteo, your reflections in terms of the European Investment Bank.
Thank you very much, and thanks for organizing this event and for the work that the Secretariat has done so far with the support of DG Energy. And let me also express my gratitude to Maria Elena Petracu that is sitting here, that has been following this initiative for the European Investment Bank since inception, and she has done all the work behind the scenes. 3 points, let's say, achievements that I have observed, we have observed from our perspective. This initiative has certainly succeeded, was also expressed earlier on, in engaging with a larger number of stakeholders, a more important number of stakeholders, including at the municipal level. And this is very important because this has raised awareness in environments that are not always friendly accepting this type of logic of transition. You know, these are initiatives that are bringing job cuts, are bringing unemployment to an extent. So the engagement with the local level, I think, is an achievement of a great importance. Second, as this initiative has contributed to shorten the gap between this region and the European Union, because indeed has fostered the dialogue between the authorities of this region and a number of European member states and European authorities and European Commission to basically showcase one more time that this is the pattern for this region with no way back, so to approximate the European Union. And third, as it was also mentioned in the earlier panel, this initiative has contributed to a number of action plans for just transition that have been developed, and then that is a concrete result on which we can build on for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. Very profound point you actually made there, you know, about the localism, the localization of the agenda, but also putting it in within a much wider sort of political dynamic of EU accession. And just we had the term multi-level perspective earlier. It is embracing that multi-level approach. Marek, we've already referenced the college and your role. Would you like to just reflect on your thoughts on the achievements from the College of Europe?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, yeah, indeed, we worked with the World Bank and cooperated with the other partners of the initiative in development of the Coal Regions Learning Academy. Initially, we meant this to be a classroom type, if you like, experience, but with COVID, we decided to make it all digital. We developed 6 courses, each comprising 5 lessons. We start with more sort of horizontal or introductory topics related to the sort of identification of what just called transition is. We're looking at framework timelines, identification of holders, but then next courses move on into more targeted, more focused topics, looking at risk management, preparation of what we call bankable transition projects. So what are the criteria that transition projects should foresee? We're looking at planning and repurposing of lands and assets and many other topics. We had the launch of the project in July this year in Natolin, the College of Europe, and there was a group of Ukrainian representatives of coal regions, and Wolfhart presented his scores, and I'm happy to say that quite a number of questions posed by the participants had their answers, in different modules of the Coal Regions Learning Academy. So I think it's quite coherent in that sense. We also made it practical. So we're making references to different case studies, different examples, not only from the EU, but also beyond, from the US, or even in Australia. The course ends with tests, so anyone can verify the comprehension, understanding of the content that she or he took earlier. And the Coal Regions Learning Academy is available on the goxi.org website of the World Bank. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marek. As the panel talked, you realize that quite a lot has been actually achieved within 3 years. So I'm very much looking forward to the picture that will be shown at the end of this session, which hopefully will capture some of these achievements. Marcin, over to you. In terms of the Polish National Fund, what are your reflections, observations on the achievements?
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the questions. So, as our role in the project was to together with the World Bank to finance the study visits in Poland, to exchange the best practices in just transition. And in my opinion, the biggest achievement of this project is that we implemented it against all odds, against the unexpected events, which is of course invasion in Ukraine. And in order to do that, you have to be open-minded and flexible, and this is the general approach that I recommend, because well, we had to be very creative to achieve that. So we have to sometimes swap the live events that we were planning to online events. We had to provide these interactive and online tools. But first and the most important part, that you have to have good communication. You have to have good partners, and if you have that, you can achieve everything.
I think that was a very positive note on which to end the first question rather. I think we can be very quick to dismiss the realities in which we work, and the very complex realities, and how much more complex they've become, what with COVID when the initiative was launched, and then the invasion of Ukraine, none of which was seen back in the launch of the event. Anyway, enough of this. I'd quite like to now reflect on key challenges encountered. Obviously, a lot has been achieved within 3 years, but it has been quite a demanding program of activity. So I'd just like to take time to reflect on these key challenges which were encountered, obviously from your respective institutional perspectives, because from the challenges we learn, and we'll come on to that in a moment, the learning, but I'd quite like just an unalloyed view of what were the challenges. So Véronique, you have the honor.
To me. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. No, from the challenges, of course, already what I mentioned before, something that I think was a key achievement, but clearly was also a challenge, was this community building, really starting from scratch. The Coal Regions in Transition Initiative in the EU had also, so the sister initiative had also only started 1.5 years ago, so it was a bit still of a learning curve to see a little bit how to embrace this just transition, how to bring the stakeholders together, and how to support them in these exchanges these community building that we wanted to achieve. It took time and efforts, but looking around, I think we have done a very good job. And we haven't been able to make these connections in the past year between all the stakeholders from the regions and the EU. Then, of course, also reaching to the local context and supporting this bottom-up process has really also not been a very easy task, especially as we were in new terrain and having to learn also from scratch. And then just the very last point, but I think Marcin, you addressed it very well. It was reminding us of the very difficult situations that we have been in over the past 2 years with the invasion of Ukraine, but also the energy crisis that was not only difficult for the EU, but also for our neighboring countries. And I think it shouldn't be underestimated.
Thank you, Véronique. I think you did touch on that whole question of the challenge of a bottom-up approach, and I think we as policymakers sometimes forget the institutional reality in which we find ourselves, you know, and the ambition sometimes takes time to take root because of the institutional reality. And it's fine having adopting a bottom-up approach in countries where there is a bottom-up institutional culture. Where there isn't one, it is actually starting from scratch often. So it is a huge challenge. Anyway, Wolf, on to you. Thoughts from the World Bank on the challenges?
So the intrinsic challenge of just transition, I think, is everything, everywhere, all at once. And addressing that needs very good coordination on the level of donor parties, of MDBs, of the platform in this case. It also needs very good governance on the level of a country. And I think we have still a landscape that is way too fragmented and splintered into individual interests. I've been at some of the Just Transition themed conferences, which were basically a beauty contest of different donors, bilaterals, MDBs, etc. And I'm pointing to the World Bank as well, of who had the most beautiful little pet project that somehow fitted the theme of just transition. And this will just not cut it on the long run. So I think the big challenge for us is now to capitalize on the momentum that we have gained in getting to know each other's work, etc., and really coordinating and doing something together. And kudos to EBRD and Anna, who is sitting here, for holding a pen on the investment plan for Northern Macedonia, because I think this is really a good start, where actually a number of donors come together and try to contribute to a larger, to something that is larger than the sum of the parts, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolf, for your candor. I think we all recognized what you were saying, and sometimes we don't say it clearly enough. So, Adam, in the same spirit of candor, over to you for what you think the key challenges have been.
Well, I have to start from Ukraine, and I think really that is certainly a major challenge, and our platform was not designed for war times, and I think it is at the same time challenge and an achievement that we managed to maintain a dialogue on just transition with Ukrainian colleagues, and we hear very well the voice also of mayors from Ukraine that want to talk about just transition in such difficult circumstances. Staying on a political note maybe, because of course the main challenge and socio-economical dimension of political decisions that the leaders have to take is still, of course, something that is determining our work. I think to a certain extent there is a level of recognition that these decisions, which go beyond governmental terms, have to be taken so as to avoid a sort of a perfect storm where all the negative potential consequences can meet at a certain point and be too late to have a effective decision. Another, I think, important point is that this platform certainly was designed to follow the EU model of which turned into a model of cooperation based on just transition mechanism. And certainly, again, I think here we have to manage to organize this platform without the just transition mechanism as it is in the EU. And I think this is something that also a lot of our counterparts are asking about. It is difficult to have a clear definition of just transition sometimes, but and I think this boring word again, governance, we use it again, it can at least help us to provide a framework of accountability and conditionalities. So I think here maybe it is a good example to follow territorial plans that are in the EU. And finally, still I think a lot of added value can be taken from the regional collaboration. So the leverage used from not only collaborating with EU member states, but between the partner countries. Actually, it's a lesson learned as well. So I will, I think, stop here and build on that in the last round. Thank you.
Yeah, Adam, some big points there. What is just transition? It is a bit of a moving target at times. I also thought your points just about emulating an EU model and putting it in a different context was a very interesting point as well. So, Anna, please, your thoughts from the EBRD perspective.
Thank you so much. I would like to completely echo what the previous participants have said, and I will try to avoid repeating myself. So I think for us, there were 3 additional things that we would like to highlight. One is in order to have just transition, you need to have transition. And I think very often we saw that the plans for the phase out, the concrete dates, they were not there yet, and as such it was difficult to support, for example, the just transition roadmaps or other plans, and especially on the planning for the workforce and reskilling and requalifications without the clear dates for the transition, because that needs to be taken into account. We also, I think, would have liked to see more projects done than we have actually done. And one of the biggest obstacles I think we see in that dimension is that we very quickly realize that a lot of the projects were rather small that we have seen. And that is a problem for all of the IFIs, because we can only finance the larger scale projects. So when we were engaging with smaller municipalities, it was difficult for us to offer that support. So I think that's a message to the municipalities who are preparing the projects to think about the scale up, and maybe the partnerships working together with the central government and others in order to ensure that the projects end up being bankable, financed, and that we can bring that very necessary grants and concessional finance to the ground to actually help you out and implementing your ambitions.
Thanks, Anna. Great points as well. I think we should actually have a T-shirt printed with, in order to have a just transition, you need a transition, and we could all wear them for Christmas or the next field visit. And I also thought your point, dates drive behaviours, was very fundamental, and we've noticed that in the EU context, where there is a clear timeline, things happen. Where there isn't, we'll just leave that question hanging. Matteo, from the European Investment Bank, thoughts and challenges?
Yeah, perhaps one point that is building on the last item mentioned by Anna. From a perspective of the European Investment Bank, from a banking perspective, the outcome of this initiative has not produced sufficient number of investments, of projects that could be financed by multilaterals, bilaterals, and that is an area for improvement for the future. Now there are, Hannah has hinted at certain ways of improving this. There are ways to address multi-sector type of investments that are required for this type of space. What is important is to improve the project identification, selection. And here, I'm happy to share that as the EIB, we're happy to put at the disposal of the Any Follow-up initiative, the initiative that is called JASPERS, and is actually financed by the European Union, and is having a number of, an expertise in a number of sectors, and could be critical for, again, a cross-sectoral type of investment. And they're also knowledgeable of the new just transition, just resilience approach of the EIB for the investments outside Europe that will be presented in Dubai in a few days. So we have two things that will be presented together. One together with EBRD and others, the Just Energy Transition Platform for the North Macedonia under the leadership of the EBRD, and we're participating, and then this Just Transition and Just Resilience new approach of the EIB. But stay tuned on this one, because tomorrow will be presented in another panel by a colleague, so you will have more details about this new approach. Thank you.
Thanks for giving that incentive for people coming back tomorrow. That's always good. Thank you, Matteo. But I really take your point about scale, innovation, novelty, and I think that's an issue not just for the Western Balkans and Ukraine. We now turn our attention to Marek and your thoughts on the challenges, either in setting up the academy or wider.
Well, I would maybe refer to the academy, but maybe with a more general assessment. The moment when we have been a little surprised was when defining the scope of the academy, we reached out to possible learners, to possible beneficiaries in the Western Balkans and in Ukraine, with a questionnaire, with a survey, asking what people think about the topics we propose, and whether they would like to add some other issues which are particularly interesting to them. And unfortunately, the feedback was not overwhelming. We didn't get very many answers, although the survey was sent out by through different channels of the principles of this initiative. And the responses we got back, they confirmed that the choice we did in cooperation with the bank and in consultation with the other partners was correct. But there was very little additional input or request for additional information, which I mean, statistically, you would expect with the number of people that received the survey, you could expect more responses. But I think here we can go back to a word that's been used today a couple of times, which is awareness. I think the limited response was caused to a certain extent by lack of awareness of what transition is and inability to formulate requests for expansion of the courses. And my other reflection, but this is, I didn't mean to talk about this, but there was a question earlier in the day about not so good examples that didn't fly very well. And this is also a moment when we ran into a block because it was quite difficult to get information from stakeholders who have been through coal transition and their projects didn't fare very well, to get their insight of what went wrong, why things didn't develop as they were hoping for. There was an element of shyness in sharing this data, although it would be for the benefit, of course, of the other communities. But this was an issue also we ran into. Thank you.
Marek, thanks for that. I think that is a perennial problem, an ongoing problem. People are always talking about good practice and best practice, but rarely do we discuss bad practice, and yet it is evidently there. Okay, Marcin, you left us with a few fundamental points at the last round of questions. So
I'm gonna do that again.
Try it again.
So, in my opinion, what is biggest challenge when it comes to the transition of coal regions? Just transition is the biggest challenge. Why? Because you have to define what is just. And when it comes to this easy question, there are many problems because in local levels, in regional levels, you have many different actors and stakeholders. And for each of these party just means something different. So you have to identify all those partners. You have local communities, you have mining sector, you have energy sector, you have local governments, you have NGOs. So in order to achieve just transition, you have to provide them tools to communicate, efficiently communicate, to work out synergy, to work out consensus, and to meet consensus through opposing expectations of all of those groups, and then create them environment to work together to create some long distance strategy, what is just transition for them, and then provide them tools to implement it, so to finance it. So for me, the biggest challenge is to identify all the stakeholders at local level and create environment for them to efficiently communicate and work together.
Thank you, Marcin. I liked your reference to what is just transition and the moral dimension. Anyway, we're not going to have that discussion right now because that could lead us in many directions. So the third question I would like to put to the panel relates to what are the lessons learned for the future, reflecting over the 3 years, what is past, but what can we learn going forward? So, Véronique, please.
Thank you. I start again with the word communication and keeping the community alive. I think that at least what we from the European Commission would like to see to continue, that stakeholders continue to meet and exchange their knowledge, experiences, the good but also the bad practices to be avoided, not just among themselves in the region, but also together with the EU. And then, of course, also with the international partners that are sitting with me here today on stage.
Wolf, over to you.
I completely agree with Véronique, and I was going to say something very similar, maybe in a little more detail. So for us, the the lesson learned is really about knowledge sharing, about capacity building, about information sharing, and thus helping co-regions, and especially on the lower administrative levels, municipalities, build a vision that is based on the doable. So something realistic, but still something visionary that they haven't thought about before. I think the study tours are an example of such information exchange, but I think there are other channels that we can explore in the future. I think for Ukrainian colleagues, for instance, study tours were sort of a lifeline to stay connected with Just Transition and carry back home things that, yeah, also opened up a vision for what, you know, what can be done better, greener after the war. A second lesson, diagnostics, I think, should be used more and in more systematic manner. I mentioned a couple of tools before. One thing we stumble over sometimes is the legal situation in countries, so understanding better what the legal constraints are, ranging from spatial planning laws conflicting with mining laws to pollute the pays principle, which doesn't allow the repurposing of brownfield sites. All these are practical challenges, little friction points that can become big barriers, and we need to address them. And finally, at the heart of transition are really the stakeholders, the people. So stakeholder engagement, I think, also is a field where we can be more systematic, more enabling, and use stakeholders more to really contribute constructively to transition processes. Those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wolf. And very complimentary to what Véronique had just said. So I think there is hopefully consensus on the panel around continuity, community, and capacity, but taking it to the next level, as you've said, Wolf. Adam, please, your perspectives in regard to lessons to apply to the future.
Well, maybe I will stay on that more philosophical note, in a sense of what can still what can contribute to the to ameliorating the initiative. I think there is a lot to be done also at the level of awareness. I think among our stakeholders, among citizens. So that has different dimensions. One is, yes, ordinary citizens still, I think, lack quite significantly the level of sufficient perception of what is just transition. And again, we come back to the definition of just transition. We had this survey on awareness done with the World Bank that shows that 80% of citizens are not fully aware of that fact. So I think everything starts from the awareness, because you cannot build the ownership of the process without that level of awareness. So here I think communication is something that is very important. That is a very important lesson learned. And I think a second one linked with what I said is how when we have a certain level of awareness, ownership, I think the region, the stakeholders have to really think of how to reinvent themselves in a way in the transition. What I mean is that, of course, I mean, energy community, for example, is based on a bit emulating EU laws in the region. Yes? So we are, to a certain degree, emulating EU member states' experience. But I think in the best possible outcome would be that actually if the regional partners kind of reinvent what is their flagship, what is their actually contribution, the human capital, for example, and projects that could actually be their contribution to the just and green transition. So a bit philosophical, a bit general, but I think that would be my conclusion.
No, very, very powerful points, Adam. Just that last point about moving people to becoming agents of change at the local and regional level is just so wholly fundamental to what we're trying to achieve. The interesting thing is that 5 speakers in a row mentioned awareness. Marek, Marcin, Véronique, Wolf, and yourself all used the word awareness as being one of the key lessons. Anyway, thank you for that, Adam. Over to you.
It's a suggestion for a drawing.
Yeah, I think the artist might have heard that.
Let me use it one more time. I think communication, awareness, knowledge sharing are incredibly important, and they're definitely the biggest achievements of this platform, in my personal opinion. But I think we need to push ourselves a little bit further than that. And in the next years of the initiative, whichever form it takes, to really focus on partnerships for implementations and for the scaling up, because the timelines are already here for quite a few countries, with the first phase outs for some of the assets to be happening before 2030. So I think we frankly are running a little bit out of time in order to make sure that the transition is happening and that it is just in a lot of the countries, and we need to really step our game collectively in terms of the support, and indeed not in a fragmented manner as was highlighted before by Wolf. I think we all, perhaps in the first years of initiative, and rightfully so, because we are still figuring out what to do, spend quite a lot of time waiting. And we spent time waiting for COVID to end, for the war in Ukraine to resolve itself, for, I don't know, Just Transition Fund to be set up, for a lot of the donor funds to come into the regions from all of the perspectives, right? From IFIs, from municipalities, from governments, from a lot of others. And I think we perhaps need to all collectively try to stop waiting and try to start making things happen in the next years, because I think if we do see concrete ideas, if we do see concrete willingness from the regions, we are very ready here to come and support you in your endeavors to try to mobilize financing, but also to try to mobilize the grant, donor finances, and other elements like that. So that is a message to all of the people from the countries in here, in terms of, if you need support, if you need any kind of advice or financing or anything else along those lines, don't hesitate to reach out to the partners, because I think we all are here for exact same reason, in order to try to support the just transition in the region.
Really profound points again, Anna. I liked partnerships for a purpose. I think, you know, that is a lesson for the future. The partnership has to be more about scaling up and delivering things. And I just think you're the first person who really called it out. We're running out of time. We're running out of time on so many fronts. And waiting to the chaos to end is not really a strategy. It's denial. It's denial. Anyway, so over to Matteo for reflections.
Telegraphically, 3 points, because we're running out of time. No, number one, let me bring the financial element again. Sorry about that, but it's a professional problem. First of all, looking at what's happening within the European Union with the just transition mechanism that EIB is sort of managing on behalf of the European Commission and the European member states, we need additional grants. We need additional concessional finance to be blended with our possible financial resources. And as you can imagine, the donor community is not that vast, and particularly in this region, we would look at the friends in the European Union, European Commission to seek additional funding. Then it was said, the second point, partnerships, additional partnerships, more coordinated. And here, particularly for the Western Balkans, we probably have already the platform in place, which is the Western Balkans Investment Framework. And I don't mention it because there is one of the founding fathers in the audience here. So, but I don't wanna say much more about WBIF, but it is a platform that is working well and could be used to increase the level of partnerships in a coordinated manner. And third, because the scarcity of the financial resources available, we need to be creative enough to allow the private sector to be more involved through a number of initiatives, but indeed through investments that can complement the public finance available for a just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. Once again, a great contribution. As you say, we're running out of time, but you got your points across quite succinctly there. I take your point on the scarcity of resource, and so we do have to think of innovative models of delivery and reimagine monies for the Western Balkans and Ukraine. Marek, over to you for thoughts on lessons learned.
Thank you very much. We're coming from an academic institution. I cannot but underline that time and effort invested in education and training is always a good investment. And I don't want to use the A word again, that has been used so many times before, but I think there is still room for actions targeting, for example, journalists in the region. people who can explain to the wider public, who have their trust, and they can deliver, build the support and build understanding for the process of coal transition. So I would say that's one. Perhaps NGOs, select NGOs that are active in the field, who can also spill over the information or share the information about coal transition, and finally maybe also the civil service people who are working on, who are or will be working on transition programs. The three groups that I came to my mind, but of course I would there is the order in which I mentioned them is, I think, significant, starting with people who can explain what coal transition is, what just coal transition is, once of course we have a common understanding of what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Marek. A very important point about identifying allies, but not only allies within communities, but catalysts within communities. Marcin, you have the honor of the final reflections of the panel before we hand over to questions from the floor.
Okay, thank you. What can I say? I just couldn't agree more with all that have been already said during this session. And I could put dot here, but I totally agree that the key message should be that technical assistance and raising awareness are the key to success. And I'm gonna say something controversial. Money is not a problem, or at least funding is not a problem, at least from the point of view of funding institutions such as National Fund. Because we have in our disposal a lot of funds right now. We have cohesion funds, we have state funds, we have modernization fund, we have RRF, we have a lot of funds. What we do not have are good projects. We do not have good portfolio of projects to support them, to use those funds in time constraints regarding all those types of funding. So that's why we need skills and knowledge at the local level, regional level, to help people identify projects and to help people and entities to apply for the funding that is available. This is key to success. So that's why I couldn't agree more with Marek, what Marek said, and I think the best investment is education because it has no time constraints.
Thank you, Marcin. Just to actually finish on that note of consensus, I think what has been quite striking is the messages coming from the panel have been very candid, but there has been this sort of a consistent message running throughout them. But I'm delighted to say that we actually have successfully ring-fenced 20 minutes for questions. So I would like you to please use this opportunity to ask questions. So either raise your hand if you're in the audience, or please do use Slido to submit your question if you are online. Oh, we've got two here, so if we could have the mic there. Thank you. Can I ask just that you quickly introduce who you are, and if your question is for a specific member of the panel or for a number of members of the panel, please say so. Otherwise, it'll be treated as just a general question to the panel. So please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the good speeches that we heard from this panel. And I have a question particularly for the last speaker. You said there is no problem. We have everything for the just transition. But in Europe, you have everything. You have all those funds, but I'm coming from Montenegro, from company, and unfortunately we don't have those funds. What to do in the next future, and what is maybe for all of you, what EU is planning to provide us the funds, to provide us opportunities for the new jobs, for the solving the infrastructure problems, for the solving educational problems, for the solving a lot of problems what's coming out of the just transition for us. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That's why I mentioned that it's gonna be controversial what I said. Of course, we are in the comfortable situation in the EU that we have so many different types of funding at our disposal. maybe I can encourage you to participate tomorrow in the financial panel as well, because I think that we are going to discuss more about funding and funding opportunities. And what I can suggest, what I can propose, and we are eager to share with you with our experience is what our fund is based on when it comes to the state funds. So our fund is working on polluter pays principle. So part of our revenues when it comes to state funds is based on polluter pays principle. And according to, let's say, geological law, revenues that comes from fines and penalties and use of environment when it comes to geological part, we can spend only on programs supporting some just transition projects. And those funds are earmarked. Those funds are completely independent from state budget. And I think this is the key to success when it comes in our fund, because those funds are only available for the amongst other the just transition purposes.
Thank you, Marcin. I'm wondering if any of the panel want to pick up on that question, or whether we should use our time to get another question from the floor. Okay, please.
I'm Kenan Hodzic from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm coming from academia. And well, thank you so much for the purposeful dedication and for comprehensive takeaways for us. I have a question that is related to lessons learned in the negative sense of, for example, like weaponization of Russian gas. What do you think, how to avoid new structural dependencies in the areas of critical raw materials or green technologies, or more or less hydrogen imports that will sooner or later arise on our horizon? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. A very profound question about how do we avoid almost the mistakes of the past going forward in terms of green transition. And actually, it's a pretty important question. So I am actually just going to ask the panel their thoughts on this one, and I'll just use the structure as before. So, Véronique, any thoughts on that one?
No, thank you for the question. I think it's a very valid question, and it's definitely been discussed a lot recently as we are trying to phase out from Russian gas. And we are, I mean, I think Commission or EU level, we are completely aware of the tendency or the danger of falling into other dependencies on the raw materials, on Asia specifically. So the Commission proposed the act on the raw materials, which is currently still being negotiated. So we will see what the outcome will be, but it's definitely something that we are taking serious. Then, of course, there's also the circular economy. I think more efforts need to go into recycling raw materials so that they can be reused and that we are not depending on mining more of these raw materials.
Any reflections on that one?
Just very briefly, yes, we are aware of this issue. So our extractors unit actually currently has two main business lines. One is exiting from coal, the other one is helping countries to develop their mineral potential. And the focus at the moment is really on critical minerals, or strategic minerals, as they are sometimes called. So we work on a number of fronts, from geodata management to managing exploration programs, etc., with countries to really make full use of their own domestic potential, just to quite bluntly balance out China's dominance in the market currently.
Marcin, seeing you had the last question, I'm not going to ask you to answer this question. So, Matteo, any reflections from the EIB in regard to that question?
No, that's a very sensitive matter, and it relates to the competitiveness of Europe as a whole. And so, as Véronique said, it's been taken very seriously by the European lawmakers. Because again, it pertains to the future of Europe essentially, and we should be careful. By the same token, we need to acknowledge that there are certain spaces where trade, economic interaction with players from Far East will inevitably continue. In your country, we have seen also as a European Investment Bank, European Union, a number of projects with heavy lifting civil works being conducted and carried out by non-European companies, which is a trend, a pattern that it seems unavoidable going forward. But by the same token, on a certain number of areas, such as the ones you mentioned, I think Europe is considering very careful about how to develop at the very least at the same pace of other geopolitical players. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I think it's important to acknowledge that not every country covered here will have the critical raw materials in terms of the deposits available. So I think it's important to understand that the dependence will be there as you transition to the renewables. The question is, how do you minimize it? And I think if you look one step up from the critical raw materials, it's important to acknowledge that producing electricity itself from renewables domestically is already a big way to reduce your dependence from the imported fossil fuels once you actually erect those solar, wind, or other power plants. But one other thing that each country could do is also focus on the development of their renewable supply chains, because a lot of jobs, for example, could be created in the operations and management of them. And that's where the skills and trainings are very important. But also parts of the manufacturing could also be done within the countries. And we are talking here both about the renewables, but we are also talking about, for example, electric vehicles or any other types of the green technologies where all of the countries present here could benefit from the supply chains, provided that there is a scale. And for there to be scale, you need to have plans for the scale up of renewables and to have very strong strategies in place in order for manufacturers to be interested in investing in your countries.
Thanks, Anna, for bringing this back to the topic. Adam, please.
Very quickly, because I think it's a very interesting question, and it touches again about the definition of just transition, because we're zooming out and we're looking into a transition, a move from fossil-based economy into mineral economy, and we can ask the question to what extent the global patterns will actually be based on global justice and just transition patterns. Just a comment, and I think zooming in again to our region, critical issue for at least two contracting parties of energy community, one currently at war about raw materials and resources there, another Serbia, lithium. I mean, this is really an issue which I think has to be incorporated as being into the strategic autonomy of the EU. And given the expected momentum for the enlargement, I think critical issue as well in that context. Just a brief comment.
Thank you, Adam. Marek, I think we'll bring you in on another question because I'm keen. I think I did see another hand in the audience. Yes, please.
Hanna Telichko from Ukraine, Space of Sustainable Development. Can I ask question from Ukraine?
Yeah, of course.
Or by Ukrainian, да? Thank you. Я дякую шановним донорам за такі цікаві відповіді, які мотивують розвиватись, подавати амбіційні проєкти. Наша громадська організація «Територія сталого розвитку» має готовий амбіційний проєкт в освіті. Це робототехнічний фестиваль інновацій з темою Just Transition. До кого з донорів ми можемо звернутися, щоб підтримати цей фестиваль, який буде кожен рік проходити в Європі, приймати участь будуть і українські, і балканські регіони? Хто може підтримати таку ініціативу, яка допоможе працювати з дітьми, молоддю в рамках інновацій, робототехніки, і це, мені здається, найкраща промоція цієї ідеї.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for bringing the Just Transition Innovation Festival to our attention. Obviously, I think we look forward to hearing more about the concept, but I'm wondering if there's anybody on the panel. Oh, Anna's got her hand up immediately. Please.
in Ukrainian, in English. I would advise you to contact the development partners and foundations. So we are talking about the philanthropic foundations who support that type of work, but also the development partners like USAID, UNDP, perhaps GIZ, and a lot of others who are very active in this type of a support domain. Because I think for IFIs, at least, you know, we are here to support investment projects. So those are the kinds of initiatives where we, for example, very actively try to collaborate with our development partners on the ground.
Yes, and I would also encourage you to get in contact with the local, with the delegation of the EU locally, because they do have support projects for civil society. I don't know exactly always the terms and conditions exactly of each of these support projects, but it's definitely worth checking with them, and locally they will know better where to direct you for possible funding.
Thank you. I think, I hope that is an acceptable answer to you. And we have got another question at the back, please. Oh, we have two questions.
Dobro večer, ja sam Milan Petrović, dolazim iz Srbije iz medijskog sektora. Zahvaljujem se na ovoj konferenciji. Hteo bih da pitam jedno, u stvari pitanje da postavim, pošto je rečeno da je veoma bitna edukacija novinara u toj nekoj priči. Ja sam u tom medijskom sektoru. Da li treba to raditi preko medijskih organizacija ili direktno preko medijskih kuća?
Sorry, we're not getting English translation.
Actually, could we just hold for a sec? We seem to have lost the English translation on the panel. I see from a few smiles in the audience that may have happened as well. So could we come back to your question while we sort the... Oh, it's working now. Could you please start your question from the beginning, because we didn't hear it, unfortunately.
Na koji način treba obezbediti edukaciju novinara u Srbiji? U Srbiji. Problemi sa kojima se susrećemo, to su uglavnom problemi u tim tranzicijama koje se ne plasiraju u javnosti i koje znatno utiču na opšti položaj same Srbije i odnosa prema Evropskoj uniji.
Marek, given that you were talking about the role of journalists in the process of just transition, which I thought was a very good point, I was wondering if you would like to perhaps take the lead on answering that question. Thank you.
Well, I'll try. I mean, there are two sides to this, of course. One would be the content part of these trainings. I think, you know, for the question of supporting journalists has appeared in our earlier work, not maybe so much from Serbia, but from other countries in the region. But yeah, I mean, we would be very happy to look into this, into development of trainings for journalists in the region. I mean, not maybe only for Serbia, because the problems can be probably quite similar. I would say the e-learnings that are available online are a very good source of information which can be disseminated to a wider group of people at times and at paces when it is convenient for them, so they can pursue their trainings, you know, on days off or in the evenings or whenever they wish, and at paces that are convenient to them. And then, of course, face-to-face sessions or study visits should supplement. Of course, not all those who take the courses online, but there can be a group selected, probably the best scholars, for example, who should take part in face-to-face sessions with their peers from the member states of your member states would share their experience. So I would say two elements: one sort of more horizontal, accessible to everyone, and then more targeted for people who are more engaged in the topic. If that
Nope, thank you.
begins to answer.
A full response. Wolf, over to you.
I just wanted to re-emphasize how important this question is, specifically in the Serbian context, but I think generally. So when it comes to just transition, it is in many countries a highly politicized and very emotional topic. On the one hand, for instance in Serbia, you have the coal mining community and you have a very strong resistance to break up this traditional fabric with a very strong identity, and of course also a very important political and economic role in Serbia. On the other hand, you have the prospect of lithium mining, which is currently so much in the media with a very, very negative connotation, and very strong resistance of NGOs, environmental NGOs, but also issues around land acquisition, etc. So having a role for and fact-based journalism in a situation like that cannot be overemphasized. I mean, it's of crucial importance. Now, when we have a just transition project in Serbia, then of course this everything all at once everywhere aspect kicks in again, and part of the everything is a very well managed and very carefully calibrated stakeholder engagement, where journalism, communication, the press plays a very, very important role to bring out information that is fact-based, that is true, that is reproducible, etc. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question at the back by the window, and
Thanks.
then we'll take some questions up from the online audience.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank all the panelists for this very, very interesting discussion. It was very difficult to select only one question to pose for me. So, the lack of ambition bears no money, and vice versa. If there is ambition, money appears, like we saw in the example of North Macedonia. So the question is, how do we get the countries to increase their ambition for transition, and to put forward at least one flagship project per coal region that will move the process of transitioning forward? So my question here is, to what extent is the Commission, also the international financial institutions, ready to use the carrot and stick mechanism, as unpopular as it is, to speed up the transition process, whether in relation to negotiations or to other processes, to funding maybe? Thank you.
Very interesting question. I think some people would perhaps take issue with your point of finance raises ambition. Finance usually raises interest, but not often, sometimes not ambition, just a potential observation. But I think we'll hand that question to Véronique, and then to our friends Wolf, Matteo, and Anna. And Adam.
Thank you for that question. I mean, I do think that we use sticks and carrots already. Maybe not always to the equilibrium that each stakeholder would like to have it. And of course, Adam can talk more about that. But I mean, I do think the carrot clearly has possible membership to EU, but then of course there also comes with certain sticks, because it comes with the stick to adopt the energy acquis of the EU. For which we also provide support to the countries. I don't know, Adam, whether you want to comment.
Adam, would you like to contribute?
I mean, on increasing the ambition, for the moment, let's say, what keeps us really busy is to ensure that at least current ambitions are properly implemented. So I really have to, on that, I think, give the very civil servant kind of a boring answer, because we are just adopted the targets in the region, which, given the circumstance, I think are quite ambitious. I mean, if we manage to achieve them. So I think now I think the ball is very much on the side of the countries. what can be a trigger, but can be also a destructive element in the big puzzle of commitments and possible carrots, is of course carbon border adjustment mechanism. I mentioned that at the beginning in the opening presentation, and it's really the result of question marks. I think there are opportunities that this can trigger in committing the countries to the closer alignment with climate neutrality, but that I think has to come with more of a political layer of the process, which will be hopefully covered by the new impetus to the enlargement process. I think.
Thank you, Adam. I'm conscious there are more questions, but I'm wondering if there are any questions from the online community. Veronica.
Me? Yeah. I have two questions, both posed anonymously. The first one is about how far or how close are we from setting up a just transition mechanism for the Western Balkans, similar to the one that exists already for EU member states? And the second question is about gas infrastructure and whether that falls under the investment programs and also under the investments funded by the European Commission in the Western Balkans.
Thank you, Veronica. We'll address those two questions. I think a speaker earlier said we are some years away from a just transition mechanism for the Balkans just due to the budgetary cycle. But Adam, any reflections on that, on the just transition mechanism and a potential rollout of such a model?
I have my reflection on just transition mechanism, but I think in that case it's more the question to the European Commission. I think we know that I mainly refer to the point concerning how this initiative is in a way emulating the EU initiative, and how in fact, of course, I mean the big lacking element of that is the just transition mechanism. So we clearly know that, and I think also referring to Marcin's comment on that in the EU or in Poland in that case specifically, there is a lot of funding, but there is no, well, in a way, absorption capacity, no mature projects. And I think one comment on that, to move a bit away from the key question, but the maturity of projects is not something that we also have in our region. So I think that can be improved, yes? So even though that there is no equal financial possibilities. But I will maybe, on just transition mechanism,
No, I think this question has come before, and of course I will answer to what the Commission has answered before. There's a lot of money going to the region. It's not under a just transition fund or under a just transition mechanism, but it can really serve for the purpose of a just transition, because what is just transition? Just transition is about supporting economic diversification. It's about supporting the decarbonization of the energy system or industrial processes. And there's many funds available, even though they might not be labeled just transition. So since 2021, under the Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans, we have mobilized almost 16 billion euros. These investments, they go to the EU Global Gateway strategy. They support investments in energy, in human capital, in environment, in climate change adaptation, transport and digital transition, among many other topics. The support also goes to infrastructure projects and also regulatory enhancement and good governance. Under this EIP, so the 16 billion, almost 3 billion went for energy and the human capital. And again, part of that went to the energy transition and the decarbonization of countries, as well as also the governance of the way the energy system is managed in the country. So whether we call it now the just transition, but I mean, the purpose was the same, to ensure that there's a transition, because there's no just transition without a transition, and of course to ensure that this is also done with good governance practices behind.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. I must say we are now beginning to run over time, but gentlemen at the front, you've just caught my eye, so you have the honor of the last question.
Hvala lijepo. Ja ću na bosanskom jeziku govoriti. Ok. Ja sam Bego Gutić, načelnik općine Banovići, dolazim iz Bosne i Hercegovine i želim se zahvaliti prije svega organizatoru ove konferencije i naravno zahvala ide i za poziv koji smo dobili da budemo učesnici. Općina Banović je vrlo mala općina sa stanovišta geografije, površine i broja stanovnika, međutim kad je u pitanju energetska tranzicija u Bosni i Hercegovini, ja je smatram najvažnijom općinom obzirom da na području općine Banović egzistira najveći rudnik koji u ovom trenutku upošljava 1/4 zaposlenih u energetskom sektoru. Moje pitanje glasi, odnosno dva pitanja imam. Prvo pitanje je, smatram da smo već u protekle 2 godine prošli puno edukacija, seminara, da smo organizovali veliki broj treninga i mislim da je vrijeme da sada krenemo u konkretnu akciju. To je konstatacija, pitanje je povlačenje sredstava lokalnih zajednica mora biti jednostavnije, fleksibilnije i direktnije. Jednostavno, na taj način smatram da ćemo ubrzati procese tranzicije. I drugo pitanje za gospodina iz Svjetske banke, obzirom da smo mi kao općina, imali smo priliku da se vidimo, da učestvujemo na jednom razgovoru. Pitanje je vezano za pilot projekte u kojima evo, mi kao lokalna zajednica učestvujemo, kad se očekuje realizacija pilot projekata koje finansira Svjetska banka. Toliko, hvala lijepo.
Wolf, if you'd lead on this question.
Yeah, great you're here. And I think you characterized Banovici very well. A small community with a big mind and a big challenge ahead when it comes to transition. I found the dialogue with the municipality as well as the mine and EPBAH so far very encouraging, because what I saw there was a really constructive exchange of ideas between those 3 parties plus the World Bank. And I think that we now have identified the chance for pilot projects, both in terms of energy transition, but also in terms of economic diversification, using some of the advantages of the community speaks for itself. The question when it will happen is not that difficult to answer. I can't pinpoint the exact date, but we are currently with EPBAH, with MOFTA, so with the government, in preparation of a concrete investment project that will have several pilot investments in Banovici. We expect to go to our board, the World Bank's board, with that sometime in probably the 3rd quarter of 2024. And from there on, it's really just a matter of the formalities of mobilizing the financing, of getting all the political approvals in Bosnia, and we can actually start implementing a pilot project in Banovici.
Thank you. I actually have had a message to say there is one more question from Selma. So, Selma, sorry, I did see you earlier, Selma, sorry.
Thank you. I did not expect this to be called out like that. Nonetheless, thank you. I'm Selma, as you heard. I'm from Friedrich Stiftung Regional Dialogue Office based in Sarajevo. And I wanted to comment on the gentleman's question on journalists. The FES, together with the Energy Community Secretariat, has the Energy Summer School program. In fact, to be fair, we are tagging along to their fantastic initiative. And we brought in energy journalism, bringing in young journalists from the Western Balkans to study and hopefully then report on these topics. Unfortunately, year on year, the number of applications we're getting is lower and lower. Part of that is a huge population drain that we have in the region that I feel it was overlooked in some of your assessments here of the impact of what this great initiative has done. Second answer that we get is that editors are not allowing these journalists to join the program because being away for 9 days or 7 days is a long period to be away. And then another question or another point on editors is they really don't want to report on these questions. Maybe it's a question of media ownership or otherwise control of media in our region. But those are some of the answers that we have. However, speaking about partnership, one of our journalists from this program actually wrote for the CRIT's newsletter on the coal regions in transition, namely Banović. So we really did our best to partner with the Secretariat, the CRIT, on that. And thanks to their flexibility, Elodie's and their and the rest of the team, we managed to include those voices in the newsletter. All of that is a huge achievement, and now I'm speaking from the local perspective of what this initiative meant, given the time and circumstances in which all of us operated. And one last point is that we managed to bring in trade union representatives also here today. So I feel that part was left out when talking about how inclusive this initiative was and what it meant for the region, but I'll let the trade unions maybe comment on that tomorrow. And now that I have a mic and you know my name, I might as well go with the question on sustaining these built results and communities. Literally, what's next for the initiative, or more specifically, when can we expect it? Because there is definitely need and expectation and momentum for this. Thank you. I hope you don't regret.
Selma, everybody knows who you are now. No, I think also it was very good that you finished before your question on the point of engaging civil society, trade unions, because perhaps they have not been marginalized in this discussion, they just haven't occurred. So thank you for bringing that into the discussion. On that question about the future, we really are pushed for time. However, I am just going to allow everybody on the panel just to give their thoughts, and it really is a one-sentence response on the future because we are way out of time. So I am going to start from the left-hand side. Marcin, what do you think the future holds for the initiative?
Well, I hope that the future is bright. Well, we as a national fund, of course, we are open for supporting such initiative in the future. So just show us what are your ideas, and I think that of course I forgot my bag of money that I usually have during such conferences, but after I got permission from our managing board, we are open for supporting further.
I think it's a compelling case to continue the platform. And just to underscore the point, the World Bank, together with other development partners, is currently setting up a very similar platform in Southeast Asia and South Asia. Demand is huge, interest is huge. The benefit is very obvious to our partners in that region, and I do hope that the logic will prevail in Europe as well.
Well, from the Commission point of view, we are also continuing the initiative, not under the current format, and not by DG ENER, but by DG NER. This is definitely more of an internal cuisine of who is managing it. In the end, it's always going to be the European Commission who will be continuing a similar initiative. It will start in 2024, and I'm sure tomorrow my colleagues from DG NER can give a little bit more information on that, but it will definitely build and expand on the current initiative. It will also broaden the scope to take into account energy-intensive industries, a more strengthened engagement with the private sector and the international financial institutions, as well as with the municipalities, to bring in more the local level of what we have already heard today. And there will probably also be pilot projects, but I'll invite my colleagues tomorrow to explain a little bit more further what they have in mind.
So second reason to come back tomorrow, first to know about just transition, just resilience of the EIB, and second because indeed the continuation is under the aegis of DG NER. European Commission has already secured commitment and funding, and the EIB has already confirmed its commitment to pursue this initiative to its next phase. So again, let's look for the details tomorrow.
So not much to add as DG NER, but if we talk about what's next for just transition in the region, I guess more collaboration, more knowledge exchange, and much more implementation of projects in the next phase, which I think we are all hoping for.
On the side of the College of Europe in Natolin, of course, we're ready and very happy to continue cooperation and sharing our experience and expertise, and going back to also what Salma said, talk about learning and teaching about coal transition, but also in the wider context of this information, because I mean the process is economically very difficult, socially very sensitive, politically charged, so there are of course different parties that are interested in disinforming, so I think this is also something that should be kept in mind. Thank you.
So maybe I would just use a couple of words that I used a lot today. So I think I'll start with awareness, ownership, governance, implementation, and effective green and just transition. These are, I think, next step that we as an organization will stick to for sure.
Thank you, Adam. Now, I'm wondering if we can briefly put up the picture that has been drawn for this session. There we have knowledge sharing. I'm glad to see awareness doesn't get quite the size I was expecting, but yep, it's quite small font. Anyway, this has been a very rich discussion. So I'd like to thank all the panel. I think it's growing awareness. Splendid. I really like this analogy of which I think Wolf initiated of going on a journey, and we certainly have taken off. And the direction has been steady, as Adam said. There was clear direction of travel, which has been maintained. We can discuss the velocity, we can discuss the speed, but the direction has been maintained. And I think it was really good that Marcin reminded us of the headwinds that greeted this journey from COVID to the Ukraine. So I think this diagram that we're all viewing does very well capture what we've discussed, and I'm delighted to see awareness is there, because I've never moderated a panel where 6 panelists in a row have used the same, referenced the same word, awareness. I think I have just a few housekeeping points before we break up. I've been reminded that you have QR codes on your lanyards. That will, if you use those QR codes, that will allow you to access the various information about the initiative that we've heard so much about on this panel, everything from the workshops, the exchanges, the academy. Please do hold on to your lanyards for tomorrow. You will need them tomorrow. We do have a photographic exhibition in the room and also in the foyer. So when you're having your drink, do have a look at it. It's in relation to the Jiu Valley, a coal community that's very much in transition in Romania. So that should be of interest to you. Please do come early tomorrow. Registration from 9 o'clock to 9:15, and then we'll start prompt at 9:15. And obviously, we very much look forward to having a drink with you through in the foyer immediately afterwards. However, this has been an incredibly rich half day. It's felt like a day. There's so much discussion and knowledge has been imparted and shared from the floor. But I would like us to thank this exceptionally candid panel in the usual manner. So can we please give a round of applause to the panel? Thank you.